They never saw the swarm coming. At 3:12 in the morning, across a 40-kilometer front stretching from the Jordan Valley to the northern Negev, 800 autonomous kamikaze drones dropped below radar coverage simultaneously. No warning sirens, no interception alert, no time for tank crews to button up hatches or scramble for cover. The first wave hit before a single IDF radar operator had processed what they were seeing on their screens. The Merkava Mark IV, Israel's most advanced main battle tank, the machine that Israel's defense establishment is publicly described as the most survivable armored vehicle in the world, began dying in columns, not one at a time, in groups. The drones did not target randomly. They had been pre-programmed with GPS coordinates of IDF armored assembly areas coordinates that Iranian intelligence had spent months mapping through a combination of satellite reconnaissance, human intelligence assets, and signals intercepts of IDF logistics communications. The first drone targeted the engine deck. The second targeted the same tank's turret ring 30 seconds later while the crew was still stunned from the first impact. The third dove directly into the open commander's hatch. This was not improvisation. This was choreography. A carefully engineered kill sequence designed by Iranian aerospace engineers who had studied Merkava vulnerability data with the same obsessive precision that Israeli engineers had once used to build the tank's legendary survivability features. Within the first 19 minutes, an entire IDF armored brigade, 112 Merkava tanks, support vehicles, fuel trucks, ammunition carriers had been reduced to burning wreckage across a front that spanned 3 separate staging areas. Crews who survived the first impacts emerged from hatches into darkness, filled with the sound of incoming rotors and the smell of burning fuel. Some ran, some tried to engage with personal weapons. The drones did not care. By the time the last wave of the strike package completed its attack runs, the IDF's primary armored division designated for Southern Front operations had ceased to exist as a functional fighting force. And in Tel Aviv, the phone started ringing. What you are about to hear is not a dramatization designed to frighten you. It is a detailed, technically grounded analysis of a military capability that exists right now today and that is being deployed with devastating effect against armored formations in conflicts from Nagorno-Karabakh to Ukraine to the current Middle East theater. The drone swarm is not the future of warfare, it is the present. And if you want to understand how a force operating under decades of sanctions and international isolation built an autonomous weapons capability that just destroyed one of the most celebrated armored fleets in modern military history, you need every minute of what follows. Subscribe to US Power Analytics, hit the notification bell, because the story we are telling today changes the calculus of every armored force on the planet, and the implications go far beyond the Middle East. 4 questions. 4 questions that the IDF's surviving senior commanders, the Pentagon's armored warfare specialists, and every defense ministry in Europe are asking right now, and that almost nobody in mainstream media has the technical depth to answer properly. First, how did 800 drones cross the Jordanian and Iraqi airspace corridors into Israeli territory without triggering the layered radar and air defense network that Israel and the United States have jointly built and maintained at enormous cost? Was this a catastrophic intelligence failure, a deliberate gap in coverage that was exploited, or evidence that Iranian electronic warfare capabilities have reached a level of sophistication that renders traditional early warning systems structurally obsolete? Second, the Merkava tank was specifically engineered with top attack protection in mind after Iranian and Hezbollah anti-tank doctrine demonstrated the vulnerability of armored vehicles to overhead strikes. Israel spent billions upgrading the Trophy active protection system precisely to address this threat vector. Tonight, Trophy failed at scale. Why? Was it a saturation problem, a sensor problem, or has Iran specifically reverse-engineered Trophy's engagement envelope and designed its terminal attack profiles to stay outside it? Third, 800 drones require an enormous logistics and launch infrastructure. They require fuel, maintenance, pre-mission programming, GPS coordinate loading, and coordinated launch sequencing across multiple sites. This operation was months in the planning and days in the final preparation. Where was the American and Israeli intelligence apparatus during those months? Where were the satellite passes, the signals, intelligence, the human sources that should have detected an operation of this scale before it launched. Fourth, Iran used 800 drones tonight. Its current inventory is estimated at over 3,000 operational units of various classes, with domestic production running at several hundred units per month. If this was not Iran's maximum effort, and it clearly was not, what does the follow-on look like? What happens when the next wave targets not armored vehicles in the field, but power infrastructure, desalination plants, and port facilities? What happens when the target is civilian rather than military? Stay with us. Every question gets answered. Part 1, the battle anatomy of a swarm strike against armor. To fully grasp what happened to the IDF's armored division tonight, you need to understand the specific tactical problem that armored vehicles face against drone swarms, because it is a problem that the entire global defense establishment has understood theoretically for years, has watched play out empirically in multiple conflicts, and has still not solved. The Merkava Mark V is an extraordinary machine by any measure of conventional armored warfare. It weighs 65 tons. Its composite armor array is one of the most sophisticated in the world, incorporating layers of steel, ceramic, and reactive armor elements designed to defeat kinetic penetrators and shaped charge warheads. Its trophy active protection system uses radar to detect incoming anti-tank missiles and rockets, and fires a shotgun-like blast of metal fragments to destroy them before they reach the vehicle. In engagements against Hezbollah anti-tank teams firing Cornet missiles in 2006, and against Hamas rocket-propelled grenades in the Gaza campaigns, the combination of Merkava armor and trophy protection proved genuinely formidable. The drone swarm exploits a different physics entirely. A trophy system is designed to detect, track, and engage projectiles approaching at high velocity from relatively predictable angular vectors. A missile fired from a hillside, a rocket-propelled grenade launched from a building. The engagement geometry is fundamentally horizontal. Threat approaches from the side or at a moderate angle. Radar detects it, countermeasure fires. The kamikaze drone. How the four-wave swarm attack was architected that Iran deployed tonight attacks from directly above at a terminal dive angle of between 70 and 90 degrees. It approaches at relatively low velocity, slow enough that Trophy's radar threshold, calibrated for high-velocity threats, does not reliably trigger an engagement response. It targets the engine deck and turret ring, the two areas where even the Merkava's extraordinary armor is thinnest, because you cannot make the top of a vehicle as heavily armored as the front without making it immobile under its own weight. This is not a new insight. The Azerbaijan-Armenia War in 2020 demonstrated with brutal clarity that Soviet-era Armenian armor, T-72 tanks, BMP infantry fighting vehicles, artillery pieces, was catastrophically vulnerable to Azerbaijani TB2 Baytar drones operating in exactly this attack profile. The lesson was clear, immediate, and widely analyzed by every defense establishment in the world, including Israel's. What changed between 2020 and tonight is the scale, the autonomy, and the coordination. In the Azerbaijan conflict, drones were operated by human pilots, watching live video feeds and manually selecting targets. One drone, one pilot, one target at a time. The constraint was not the drone. The constraint was the human bandwidth required to operate them. Iran solved the human bandwidth problem. The drones that struck the IDF armored division tonight were operating autonomously within designated target zones. They were pre-programmed with kill boxes, geographical areas within which they had authority to identify and engage valid military targets without real-time human command. Their target recognition systems used a combination of thermal imaging and machine vision algorithms trained on thousands of images of Merkava tanks, fuel trucks, and IDF support vehicles. When a drone sensor array matched a target image above a confidence threshold, it initiated its terminal attack sequence automatically. 800 drones, each making its own kill decision simultaneously. No human bottleneck, no command delay, no communications link that could be jammed or severed to shut down the attack. This is the fundamental revolution in autonomous weapons that military theorists have been predicting for 15 years. Iran deployed it operationally tonight against one of the most capable armored forces in the world. The attack unfolded in 3 coordinated waves. The first wave of approximately 250 drones hit the northernmost armored assembly area near the Jordan Valley, where 2 armored battalions had been staging in preparation for a potential ground operation. These drones flew nap-of-earth profiles, hugging terrain at altitudes below 20 meters through the Jordan Valley corridor, exploiting gaps in Israeli radar coverage created by terrain masking. They arrived simultaneously across a 2-kilometer front, attacking from multiple azimuth angles to prevent tank crews from orienting their vehicles for maximum armor protection. The second wave of 300 drones struck the central staging area 40 seconds after the first wave impacts began. This timing was deliberate. The 40-second gap was calculated to ensure that IDF command was fully occupied with the first strike, that communications channels were saturated with emergency traffic, and that any surviving trophy systems in the first strike zone had expended their countermeasure ammunition and not yet reloaded. The third wave of 250 drones completed the operation by targeting the logistical tail, the fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, recovery vehicles, and mobile command posts that give an armored formation its operational endurance. An armored brigade without fuel and ammunition is not a fighting force. It is a collection of very expensive and very immobile metal boxes. Within 19 minutes, all 3 waves had completed their attack runs. The damage assessment that IDF engineers will eventually compile will take days, but the immediate operational reality was apparent within the first hour. The armored division designated for Southern Front operations could not move, could not fight, and could not be reconstituted as a combat-ready force without weeks of rebuilding. Part 2. The technology. How Iran built a drone army under sanctions. The story of how Iran developed the autonomous drone capability deployed tonight is one of the most remarkable technological achievements of the 21st century. And it is a story that receives almost no serious coverage in Western media, because acknowledging it requires acknowledging conclusions that are deeply uncomfortable for the narrative of Iranian technological backwardness that Western governments have been selling for decades. Start with the Shahed program. The Shahed 136, the loitering munition that became internationally known through its use in Ukraine, was Iran's first widely deployed kamikaze drone design. Its airframe is simple. Its propulsion is a small 2-stroke engine derived from commercial lawn equipment. Its navigation is GPS-based, with a rudimentary terminal guidance system. Against undefended or lightly defended targets, it is devastatingly effective. Against sophisticated air defenses, it is relatively easy to intercept. Iran knew this. The Shahed 136 was not the destination. It was the manufacturing and operational foundation from which something more capable could be built. The progression from Shahed 136 to the autonomous swarm systems deployed tonight took approximately 5 years and involved several distinct technological advances, each building on the last. The first advance was miniaturization. The drones in tonight's strike are significantly smaller than the Shahed 136, smaller radar cross-section, lower thermal signature, quieter acoustic profile. Iranian aerospace engineers achieved this miniaturization by developing domestic alternatives to components that were unavailable under sanctions. The engine is an Iranian-designed turbofan derivative running on a kerosene air mixture that produces less acoustic signature than the Shahed's 2-stroke. The airframe is constructed from domestically produced carbon fiber composites. The electronics are built around Iranian-manufactured chips that Western analysts had assumed were beyond Iran's domestic fabrication capability. The second advance was autonomous target recognition. The machine vision systems and the drones deployed tonight were trained on imagery data sets that Iranian intelligence assembled over several years. Satellite imagery, commercially available photographs, captured Israeli military equipment, and technical drawings obtained through intelligence channels. The resulting neural network can distinguish a Merkava Mark V from a civilian truck with high confidence under thermal imaging conditions, even when the vehicle is partially obscured by camouflage netting or terrain. Training a neural network of this capability requires substantial computing infrastructure. How Iran obtained the necessary computational resources under technology sanctions is a question that Western intelligence services are currently asking with some urgency. The answer likely involves a combination of domestically developed hardware, cloud computing resources, inside Iran's AI-guided top attack drone technology, accessed through intermediaries and direct assistance from partners who shall remain diplomatically unnamed in polite company, but whose initials are not difficult to guess. The third advance was swarm coordination. Individual autonomous drones are tactically useful, but strategically limited. A determined adversary can defeat them one at a time if given sufficient warning. The revolutionary capability is coordinated swarm behavior, where hundreds of autonomous units share situational awareness, deconflict flight paths to prevent collisions, collectively manage the electromagnetic environment, and synchronize their attack timing to arrive at targets simultaneously from multiple vectors. This coordination does not require a real-time communications link to a human operator. It operates on a distributed mesh network among the drones themselves, each drone broadcasting its position and status to its neighbors, which update their flight paths accordingly. The mesh network is frequency hopping and spread spectrum, making it extremely difficult to jam. Severing communications between individual nodes does not disable the swarm. It degrades it slightly while the remaining nodes redistribute the coordination function. Iran tested components of this swarm coordination capability in multiple operational environments before tonight. Houthi operations in Yemen provided live testing conditions against Saudi and UAE air defense systems. Hezbollah drone operations in Lebanon provided data on Israeli radar and electronic warfare responses. Each test refined the algorithms. Each failure was analyzed and corrected. Tonight was not the first deployment of this technology. It was the deployment of a mature, operationally tested system against a high-value target. The production scale also deserves specific attention. 800 drones in a single operation represents a significant fraction of a monthly production run, not the entire inventory. Iranian drone production facilities dispersed across multiple sites, hardened against air attack, and deliberately oversized relative to immediate operational requirements, are currently estimated to be producing between 800 and 1,200 drones per month across all variants. The facilities are underground. Several are built into mountain excavations. They continue producing regardless of what happens on the surface. This means that Iran can sustain operations of tonight's scale repeatedly, potentially monthly, without depleting its inventory. The production rate exceeds the consumption rate even at high operational tempo. This is not an arsenal that can be exhausted by conventional attrition. Part 3. America's blind spot. The intelligence failure that made tonight possible. Let us now turn to the question that every intelligence professional in Washington, Langley, and Fort Meade is going to spend the next several months trying not to answer publicly. How did the American and Israeli intelligence apparatus miss the preparation for an 800 drone strike operation? Because missing it was a choice, not a capability failure, but a series of assumptions, blind spots, and institutional biases that collectively produced a catastrophic analytical error. The American intelligence community has spent the past 2 decades optimizing for counterterrorism and near-peer conventional military analysis. Its satellite constellation is extraordinarily capable at imaging fixed facilities, tracking vehicle movements on roads, and monitoring known military installations. What it is less optimized for is detecting the distributed, dispersed, small unit logistics operations that support drone swarm preparation. Preparing 800 drones for launch does not look like preparing a missile strike. It does not require large fixed launch pads that are visible from orbit. It does not require the movement of massive fuel tankers or the distinctive electromagnetic signature of radar systems and guidance uplinks associated with ballistic missiles. Drone launch preparation looks like a convoy of light trucks moving to dispersed positions in agricultural areas, desert terrain, and mountain valleys. It looks like technicians working in covered workshops on what could be farm equipment. It looks like nothing distinctive from 30 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Iran spent months exploiting this analytical blind spot. Launch teams were dispersed across dozens of sites in western Iran, eastern Iraq, through proxy-controlled territory, and northern Syria. Each team handled a small number of drones, 20, 30, 50 at most, which were transported to launch positions in civilian vehicle configurations and assembled on-site within hours of the operation window. No single location held enough drones to register as a major threat indicator against the analytical thresholds that trigger elevated intelligence attention. The signals intelligence picture was similarly degraded. Iranian drone operators used a communications protocol specifically designed to minimize electronic emissions during the preparation phase. Mission data, target coordinates, attack profiles, swarm coordination parameters was loaded into drone flight computers before departure from Iran, not transmitted in flight. During the approach phase, the drones emitted almost nothing detectable. The mesh coordination network among the drones themselves used frequency and power levels below the detection threshold of the Israeli ground-based signals intelligence infrastructure. The human intelligence picture was the most consequential failure. Recruiting sources inside Iran's drone program, individuals with access to operational planning, launch schedules, and target lists requires years of relationship development, significant risk acceptance, and an operational security environment that can protect sources from Iran's formidable internal counterintelligence apparatus. The IRGC's Intelligence Directorate has systematically identified and eliminated foreign intelligence penetrations of its most sensitive programs for over a decade. The drone program specifically has been compartmentalized at a level that makes source recruitment exceptionally difficult. What this means in practice is that American and Israeli intelligence had general knowledge of Iran's expanding drone capability. They had assessed the production rate, estimated the inventory, observed testing activities. What they did not have was specific operational intelligence on timing, targeting, and the precise technical parameters of the autonomous swarm system. The difference between knowing that your adversary has a capability and knowing when and how they intend to use it is the difference between strategic warning and tactical surprise. Tonight, Iran achieved complete tactical surprise against the world's most heavily resourced intelligence apparatus. The institutional bias that contributed to this failure is worth naming directly. There is a persistent tendency within Western intelligence analysis to underestimate the practical capabilities of states operating under technology sanctions. The assumption, rarely made explicit but deeply embedded in analytical culture, is that access to Western supply chains, Western education systems, and Western financial infrastructure is a prerequisite for genuine technological sophistication. Why Washington watched and did nothing. Iran has spent 20 years systematically proving this assumption wrong. Tonight's operation is the most dramatic proof to date. Part 4. The will that built the swarm. Iran's doctrine of technological sovereignty. There is a concept in Iranian strategic thinking that does not translate easily into English, but that is absolutely central to understanding how tonight's capabilities were built. The concept is sometimes rendered as resistance economy or self-sufficiency doctrine, but neither translation fully captures what it means in practice. At its core, it is the idea that external dependency is a strategic vulnerability, that a nation which relies on foreign suppliers for its critical military components is a nation that can be coerced into paralysis by simply cutting off those supplies, and that therefore the only genuine security lies in developing domestic capability across the full spectrum of technologies required for national defense, even if that development is slower, more expensive, and more painful than simply purchasing the required items on the international market. Iran adopted this doctrine not as an ideological preference, but as an operational necessity after the revolution of 1979 severed its access to American military technology, and after the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, demonstrated with brutal clarity what happens when a nation's military runs out of spare parts for weapon systems. It can no longer source. The generation of Iranian engineers and scientists who built tonight's drone swarm grew up in that doctrine. They were educated in Iranian universities that were deliberately expanded and technically upgraded precisely because Iran could not send its brightest students to MIT and Caltech and expect them to return. They worked in research institutions that were funded regardless of sanctions pressure because the political leadership understood that the alternative to domestic capability was permanent strategic vulnerability. They were motivated by a nationalism that is not reducible to ideology, a genuine pride in building something real from indigenous effort, and a genuine anger at a world order that tried to prevent them from doing so. The engineers who designed the autonomous target recognition system that killed Merkava. Tanks tonight were not working for abstract political principles. They were solving a specific technical problem. How do you give a small, cheap aerial platform the ability to distinguish a valid military target from a civilian vehicle under thermal imaging conditions in real time without human intervention? And they solved it. The solution required expertise in computer vision, embedded systems, machine learning, and aerodynamics. All of that expertise exists inside Iran today. It was built over 20 years of deliberate investment. The commanders who planned tonight's operational concept, the three-wave timing, the terrain masking approach routes, the targeting of logistical support as the third-wave priority, were working from a doctrine of armored warfare that is more sophisticated than anything the IDF strategic planning anticipated. They studied the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War. They studied the drone operations in Yemen. They studied the anti-armor experience of Hezbollah in Lebanon. They synthesized those lessons into an operational concept that specifically addressed the defenses that Israel had developed in response to those earlier conflicts. This is the pattern that defines Iranian military development. Identify a vulnerability, develop a tool to exploit it, test the tool in a proxy environment, refine it based on operational feedback, deploy it at scale when the political and strategic conditions are right. The timeline from concept to tonight's deployment was not rushed. It was patient, extraordinarily patient. The kind of patience that comes from a strategic culture that measures its struggle in decades rather than election cycles, that understands the adversary's domestic political constraints, knows that democratic societies have limited tolerance for sustained conflict, and builds capabilities designed to be used at the moment of maximum adversary vulnerability rather than at the moment of maximum Iranian readiness. That moment is now. Part 5. The global order fractures. What burning tanks mean for the world. Pull back from the battlefield. From the burning tanks and the shattered drone carcasses and the stunned IDF officers trying to reconstitute a command structure for a division that no longer exists. Pull back to the level of global strategic architecture and ask the question that nobody wants to ask out loud. What does tonight mean for the future of conventional armored warfare? And what does it mean for the international order that has been built on the assumption of Western military technological superiority? Start with the armored warfare question, because it is the most immediate and the most tractable. The tank has been pronounced dead before. After every anti-armor innovation, the shape charge, the guided anti-tank missile, the top attack munition, military theorists have declared armor obsolete and then watched armies continue to rely on it because nothing else provides the same combination of firepower, protection, and mobility that enables ground forces to seize and hold terrain. The tank survived the Cornet missile. It survived the Javelin. It survived the early drone threats by evolving its active protection and electronic warfare suites. What happened tonight is different in degree and possibly in kind. 112 tanks destroyed in 19 minutes by a system that costs a fraction of what the tanks cost, that can be produced at industrial scale under sanctions, and that can be deployed with minimal operator training and no requirement for pilots or crews. The economics are catastrophically asymmetric.